Welcome to The Explainer. We break down big topics, and today we're tackling a huge one. Who was the wealthiest person to ever live? Seriously, the answer might completely change the way you think about money. All right, so let's just jump right in. When you hear the word rich today, names like Elon Musk probably pop into your head, right? We're talking about a net worth that is just staggering, almost impossible to comprehend. But what if I told you that about 700 years ago, there was a guy whose wealth was so immense, so vast, that modern economists just throw up their hands and call it incalculable? Yeah, turns out history tells a very different and a much, much bigger story about what it means to be wealthy. So here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going on a journey, really, to track down the wealthiest person ever. First, we'll look at how the whole idea of wealth even got started. Then we'll meet a man who had so much gold he literally broke an economy with it. After that, we'll see what it's like to own an entire country. And finally, we'll watch how modern wealth as we know it was invented before we try to answer that big question, who gets the crown? Okay, first things first. If we're going to even begin to understand these incredible historical fortunes, we have to kind of reset our modern brains about what money even is. So let's go way, way back to the very beginning. Think about it. Before gold, before coins, before anything resembling currency existed, what did it mean to be rich? It meant something way more basic, more fundamental. It simply meant you were safe, you had food, and you were alive. You know, the wealthiest person in the Stone Age didn't have a stock portfolio. Nope. They had a steady supply of food and clean water. They had a safe cave, a good shelter to keep them out of the rain. And, maybe most importantly, they had a strong tribe around them. You know, skilled hunters and gatherers who made sure everyone was protected and fed. That was true wealth. And this is the key takeaway here. Wealth isn't just a number in a bank account. It's not a fixed thing at all. It's this concept that's always changing, always adapting to what people need and value in any given era. Okay, so as humans started building things, civilizations, cities, that whole definition of wealth, it shifted big time. Suddenly, wealth became something you could touch, something you could count, something you could hoard. Think legendary treasures, the stuff of ancient kings. A perfect example is King Solomon, back in the Bronze Age. This guy controlled massive trade routes, and his kingdom was just showered with tributes of gold. We're talking so much gold that if you tried to calculate his fortune today, you'd land somewhere in the trillions of dollars. Trillions. All right, but now, let's talk about the guy who many people think is the undisputed champion of wealth. A figure whose fortune wasn't just big, it was, for all practical purposes, infinite. We're heading to the 14th century, to West Africa, to meet Mansa Musa, the emperor of the Mali Empire. Calling him a billionaire doesn't even begin to cover it. This man effectively owned the source of what was then the world's most desirable commodity, gold. Get this, at its peak, his empire controlled nearly half of all the gold in the entire old world. Now, some folks have tried to put a number on it, maybe around $400 billion. But that just completely misses the point. How do you put a price tag on someone who controls the supply of gold itself? His wealth wasn't a number. It was a fundamental force shaping the global economy. And it wasn't just about what he possessed, it was about what he built. He turned cities like Timbuktu into these world-renowned centers for learning and culture. And if you want a picture of this incredible power, just look at his pilgrimage to Mecca. I mean, he didn't just travel. He moved a literal city across the desert. Just try to imagine this, a caravan of 60,000 people, right? And with them, 80 camels. And each one of those camels was carrying 300 pounds of pure gold. So what happens when this moving mountain of gold passes through a city like Cairo? Well, he started giving it away. He gave so much gold to the poor that he completely flooded the market. The value of gold just crashed. It caused a massive economic crisis that the entire region took more than a decade to recover from. Think about that. He is the only person in history to single-handedly control the price of gold, simply by being generous. Okay, but let's shift gears a little. What if wealth isn't about controlling a commodity, even when as precious as gold? What if wealth is owning the entire economic engine of a nation? Or, in this next case, an entire empire? And that brings us to the Roman Emperor Augustus Caesar. As the top guy in Rome, he controlled everything. The lands, the armies, the resources. But here's the kicker. The entire country of Egypt, which was one of the wealthiest agricultural regions on the planet, wasn't just part of the empire. It was considered his personal property. Yeah, when you own an entire country like it's a piece of real estate, your net worth is on a completely different level. Historians have tried to do the math, and they estimate that his personal fortune was somewhere around $4 trillion in today's money. $4 trillion. So, we've seen wealth as survival, as treasure, as owning an entire empire. But the definition kept evolving. The next big shift led to the rise of global finance and industry, and a model of wealth that starts to look a lot more familiar to us. Take two examples, centuries apart. First, in the Renaissance, you have this German banker, Jakob Fugger. He basically invented wealth through finance, getting so powerful he was loaning money to kings and even the Pope. Flash forward to the Industrial Age, and you get John D. Rockefeller, who built his fortune by monopolizing a critical resource, oil. And here's what's wild. At their absolute peak, both of these guys, in totally different eras, had fortunes worth about 2% of the GDP of their entire continent. And Rockefeller is the perfect example of this new kind of wealth. His company, Standard Oil, wasn't just a player in the oil market. It basically was the oil market. I mean, it controlled a staggering 90% of all oil in America. That kind of total domination is what made him the very first billionaire in the nation's history. Okay, so after this whole journey, through different ages, different ideas of what it even means to be rich, we're back where we started. Who was the richest person ever? Well, when you lay all the contenders out like this, you realize pretty quickly, we're not exactly comparing apples to apples. I mean, how do you even begin to weigh King Solomon's treasure against Augustus Caesar owning an entire empire, or stack Rockefeller's oil monopoly up against Mansa Musa's control over gold itself? The truth is, the answer isn't a single name. The answer really depends on what you define as wealth. Is it a hoard of physical treasure? Is it absolute power over land and people? Or is it total domination of a modern industry? The title of richest person ever completely changes depending on the rules you're playing by. And that leaves us with one last, kind of mind-bending thought. While we can try to put a number on Augustus's fortune, trillions of dollars, the story of Mansa Musa leaves us with a totally different idea. It makes you ask a bigger question. Who is truly the richest? Is it the one who has the most money you can count? Or is it the one whose wealth is so absolute, so immense, that it completely breaks the system we use to measure it? Now, that's a legacy more powerful than any pile of gold.